All right. Looks like we are live for this afternoon's collaboration chat. Super excited to be here. So we're talking about change, because that's often where analysis or project management, our work takes us, is helping to enable successful changes. And notice there already I started off with change. It's the changes. It's the end results people want. That's where we're going with change work. It's not about just implementing a solution. So we're going to talk about different things. If we're not already connected yet, please make sure and connect with me over here. That's the easiest way. Also sign up for my collaboration Catalyst newsletter so that on LinkedIn once a month, I'll send out tips and tricks on how to build in collaboration skill sets, techniques, pieces into your business analysis, project management, change-based work. Anywhere you want a little more productivity, get more done, please sign up for that. All right. And so let's get started here. I'm super excited because, these conversations always are really good places to recap the questions, the ideas, the thoughts that come to us from our different courses, online, and more. And so today's collaboration chat, again, we're looking at change work. And, let's think about the change work, because this has been something that's been bothering me a little bit, because we get these roles and we get told to do a certain activity, right? And so think of a business analysis professional. They're hired maybe to do requirements. Well, requirements are great, except that if the system, if the environment, if the people aren't ready, willing to accept the requirements work isn't that great. What we want to do with requirements is we want them to lead to a solution. Now, if people don't understand your role, that might need to change, right? We need some communication. If people don't understand how requirements work, well, again, maybe some training. If you propose a recommended solution that matches all your requirements, but the decision makers want to go with their decision, well, that's kind of a culture and education piece there again that really kind of bothered me with change work. It's not just what are we changing, it's about everything else that has to change for our change work to be successful. And so I think that's something to really think about when you're doing any kind of change-based work, especially mostly like projects, right? How many of us are on projects? When we're working on projects, project is a temporary endeavor to deliver a change that results in business value. So when you're working on that project, change is not just the product going from what we have to where we want to be. It's everything in the solution that makes that change successful. So think about your solution scopes. This is why solution scope is always beyond a product scope. Really important here to know the difference. You want that difference on solution scope versus product scope, because solution includes everything you have to do to make it successful. Is that when we talk about changes, let's share some screen here real quick. All right. Get this going. See if I can do this properly this time. There we go. Definition of change. So when talking about change work, think about how you define change. It's often to make or become different, that we go from some sort of current state to a future state. There's some act of transformation. And so we're talking about change there. So with change work, make or become different, just because the system's different. You go from paper-based to technology. What else has to keep changing? What else has to evolve so that that change of the system becomes a valuable business result? That's the part where we're talking about like change here. What is everything that goes from that current state to that future state? That's part of your change solution scope. What is transforming? It's not just a process. It's often mindset, that we think about change, it's so frequent. Because here's one of my favorite questions is I'll ask, what is changing? All right. So let's share what is changing. Right now, think about all the things that are changing. Often this is really easy to do. There's so much that's changing. You're changing, you're evolving and growing. Others are changing. The environment is constantly changing. Technology, of course, changing faster than we realize. Organizations are changing. The world is changing, right? So we live in a world of constant change. Now, here's a fun question when we're talking about change. What is not changing? What is consistent? I liked it. One person pointed out maybe the only thing that is consistent is we're going to constantly change. And so it's that part on working in a dynamic world. Recognize that, because when you're doing change work, that means all your changes, all your efforts, everything you do has to be successful in an environment, in a context, in a place with people, processes, and technology are constantly changing. See, that's the trick. That's what we mostly miss on project work. When we talk about projects fail, it's because we're not looking at the whole scope of change. We're looking at the whole scope of the product. We're looking at the whole scope of the project, the budget, the schedule. What has to change? What inputs have to evolve so that our outputs are better? And it's not, again, just the one thing you're producing, you're building. So when I ask about change to a lot of people, my favorite question is often about, well, tell me, if change is so hard, what makes it hard? The trick is that what makes change hard is going from here to there. I love this example. So think about where we're at now, where we need to be. It's not just what we're doing again with the project, but think of the trapeze artist, those circus acrobats that swing from one trapeze to another, right? They go from left to right. At one point, I'm hanging on tight here. That trapeze artist has to let go and grab the other side. That moment where they're in the air, there's a moment where they're not touching either trapeze. That is what makes change scary. That's what makes change work hard, is because that is unknown. That feeling when you have to let go of one and reach to the other, that's the part that's often the hard work with change. Because to find that piece, I have a current state, I have a future state. Where we're at now, where we want to be. Those are easy to describe. All the work you have to do has to go in between the here and there. And it's often unknown how much has to change, who's got to change, when, where. And so think about your change work. Have you articulated that gap, that chasm that has to go from where we're at, where we want? It's the transition that is hard. The end result often isn't hard, especially if it has benefits, productivity, easier, faster, bigger, better. That's where we want to, think about what makes it easy. Now, here's something though, we're going to talk about it. That trapeze artist, that was clear sailing, right? Going from where I'm at to where I want to be. What happens though is we often encounter resistance. When you do change work, you're going to get some pushback. You're going to get people who don't want to change, people who don't like the new system. People, no matter how much you've told them how awesome the new solution is, not interested. Okay. Well, so we got to change our perspectives. Think about resistance when you do change work is going to be certain. It's absolutely going to happen. Because physics, go to physics real quick. An object in motion stays in motion unless impacted by another source of energy, any other object. So as long as we keep doing what we're doing, that's going to keep working to a point. But remember, everything else around us is changing. So when you hit resistance, it's because you're changing the flow of energy. So no, it's certain you will get some resistance, but plan for it because it's simply a natural function of change. What I love though is think about this. Resistance means we have touched on something important. Think about it. You know what scares me the most about doing some of my change work? Apathy. Me sending out something, say email. You ever send the email? You send it to 20 people. No responses is what scares me. Because I don't know, did anyone get it? Did anyone read it? What are they talking about? Have they forwarded it up to HR? Now I'm in trouble. Like, I have no feedback. There's nothing there. Whereas if I send out that email and I get a scathing email back about all the things are wrong, that's not right, this is not what we're doing, you don't have it correct, I can say, of course, thank you first. Thank you for the feedback. Feedback is a gift. What does it need to be? What should it look like? What is the correct information? I've got someone to now give me some input on where we got to take it. The apathy is what scares me more than anything. So going back, that when we talk about change work and you're going to meet some resistance, this is really important to know that you found something people are passionate enough to give you feedback on. They're passionate enough, excited, motivated enough to put a stance in place on where they stand with the change work. And what I love about this is when you do get resistance, that is your best place to learn and improve. Okay. And so that's something that, again, think about your change work, the resistance, see where there is resistance, and actually, if you think about it, it could be positive resistance, but people could be positively like, can't wait to hurry up and get to the new one. Don't let them move too fast sometimes. But again, a sign that something's important. How cool is that? Now, remember though, resistance is not necessarily logical. You will find those people who it's important to them. That's why they're giving you feedback. But they're not necessarily logical in why or how they feel about the situation. Okay. So don't worry that what you said, it's so bad. It doesn't have to be logical. Okay. It can be interested, but not necessarily logical on there. And that's totally okay. Right. So just know that. But it's also not something you have to fix. Do not feel you have to overcome or combat every piece of resistance you get when doing change work. This is for something you to focus in on and take it as input, but then address at the appropriate time. And please, 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 my passionate people, my proactive change practitioners, know that resistance is not meant to be personal. It's not about you. The change is hard. The change is wrong. The system is wrong. The process is awful. You are awesome. It's never meant to be personal. Okay. Even if they say you, Jamie, are awful. What about me was awful? Was it my approach, my communication, my style? There wasn't Jamie was wrong. There was something I did, my work product, the communications. See, those are things, and that's what can be fixed. Because resistance does not mean things are completely lost control. So don't worry when you hit resistance. If you're newer on a project and people are fighting you back, doesn't mean that you have no clue what you're doing. Again, it simply means it's there. So when we see resistance at change work, I just want to tell you, expect it, also recognize it. See that there is resistance and don't take it personally, please. But surface it and acknowledge the resistance. We're seeing something here that's not sitting so well. And then use your tools to lessen the resistance. Your communication plans, team meetings, collaboration, engagement activities. That's the piece that, like often I'll ask people, how transparent are you? That will solve a lot of resistance. What do you share? When do you share? With whom do you share? Why do you share? These are questions. My current project I'm working on, we talked about, the beginning of the project, we got people involved, energized, they were excited. We had monthly information going out about the project so people knew up to date. That's not happening now. And so I asked, why not? Like, we should do that. And then they said, well, let's just give it to supervisors and supervisors share it out. Well, before we just gave it to everybody. What makes the supervisors different? Why not share it with everybody? Now, this is a question I always ask people. Is there anything you don't share? Like, I try to be as 110% transparent through all my change work because it builds buy-in, builds trust. It builds in those factors, those things that have to change along the way that make your change work successful. If I don't buy those in there, I'm not going to get very far in the actual work itself. When I come to people and say, hi, will you please test and use the new system? No, they got to trust me. So I share as much as it possible. This was always a good question. Someone asked me though, what do you not share? And it's like, well, what would be something you wouldn't share? Maybe job salaries, position descriptions, maybe, maybe there's something on there. We're going to select a new vendor. Until the vendor is known, we don't say who we're thinking about. There might be a few pieces, but again, I really challenge you. I share as much as the work as possible because it's about the work. It's about the change. All my change I'm doing is not for me normally. My change work is to help enable others, help the organization, help the business. So I ask right up front, how much can we share right from the go and then continue that? Don't start with a lot of information. Then, again, like my current project, we're not sharing as much. We're not having those group, large team meetings, all hands. That makes it feel very transparent. Everyone's getting the same message at the same time. Those build in and are wonderful elements of change work. And so that this change, and I say hard and really thinking through the full scope of changes, I want you to think through a number of the elements. And this was kind of where I was coming with today, because we're talking about when you do change work, it's more than just a project, the product you produce. Now, when we talk about change work, the content, that's what's actually changing. But think operations, structures, system, that's like the product you're building, this technology solutions on there. Then I want you to think about the process, how the change occurs. This is what is your change process that gets us from here to there? How fast are we moving? Do decisions come fast or are they slow? How engaged are everyone? What is that whole communication process throughout? And then think about your context. Where are we doing this? Are there other projects with competing priorities? I love it. Not when my PM tells me, oh yes, I've got 4 other projects I'm working on too. They're not dedicated in here, or they're different focuses. That's context I need to help work through this when I'm talking about the change work. So very important to know those items. And if you think about it, the change work itself is pretty easy. What you have to change, with whom you have to change, that gets to be harder. Because it's often 90% of the work is people work. You can't make people change. You have to have them buy into the changes and figure out how they can change the elements they need on there. So if you're having to do change right now, or you're working on a project, here's a great tool I want to give you. Think about the elements of your change, the content, the process, the environment. So if you're making a change right now, if you're on a project, what is the content, the meat, the thing that's changing? But then what are your change work processes? And then what else is going on? What's the context to where all this change is happening? The content is the what. What are we changing? How are we changing? That's the processes. Where are we changing? When are we changing? Who's got to change? That's the environment, the context you're working in. When you take this view of your change work, 1, you're scoping it. Now you know what's actually involved. And 2, you can see all the elements beyond just the what, that we're focused on so much more. How, where, when, who. Hopefully we have a why we're changing. But this is your change works scope. That's your change scope you've got to work with. And so it's thinking about change in that broader perspective that I hope these like tips and tricks to really think about what your project is doing, what else is going on with it, what product you're trying to bring to market. Think about that context. Think about how we're changing. Do we need a different process to bring this new product to market? That's really important, right? And so I really want to thank you for taking the time here with me today. I've really enjoyed talking about this because, again, it's come up recently and really wanted to see this information highlighted for you and to think about change work. It's way beyond just getting in a new technology. It's everything that has to happen. And so if you want to talk more change work, or you need some help with yours project, or got a good topic to share and want to just collaborate a little bit more, make sure and connect with me. I've put in there my link to my contact page where you can sign up for times with me or the latest class. And we'll keep working on our change work so that we enable change solutions, long ROI, well beyond projects, because this change work can be fun, but working with change can be hard. So let's not struggle and let's be successful. So thank you so much. Aloha.